Good evening. I'm Bill Christopher with the Dorchester Chamber of Commerce, and I want to welcome and thank you for joining us on this snowy evening, or if you're actually watching us on recording, maybe on a snowy day, depending on whether you're watching us on Thursday or Friday. Tonight, we're going to be having our continuation of our conversation with Cambridge Waterfront Development, Inc., CWDI. But before I do that, I want to take a minute again to thank our sponsors for this program, the Cambridge Community Conversations, WHCP, obviously for all the work they do for this and hosting it and all the technical work and support, and Julie and the team and Mike and Doug back there making sure everything comes off and works the way it should. For Cambridge Association of Neighborhoods, CAN, Dorchester Banner, the Dorchester Star, and Dorchester Chamber of Commerce, obviously, for the work all those groups do to bring these conversations to you, to try to keep you informed of what's happening in the area. Again, we're talking about the Cambridge waterfront, again, from the Bill Burton Pier over to the creek. Very valuable piece of land and a very important development for the community over the next several years in terms of what we want to do. We've got Jeff Powell joining us tonight, board member from CWDI, long-term member of the community, and has a lot of great ideas about things we should be doing and looking after the best interest for us. But before we get to Jeff, we're actually going to play a video for you. It's a TED Talk that was done in Jacksonville, Florida, by a gentleman, Ed McMahon, not the Ed McMahon from the Johnny Carson show. It's Ed McMahon. He's a consultant. He's an expert in placemaking and basically development work. And we thought watching this video, it actually was kind of appropriate for as we talk about things here, and we thought it would actually stimulate some conversation for what's being done here in Cambridge and help folks understand why it's important to get this right, and the impact the development can have on the community long term. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and get that video introduced. And again, Mr. McMahon will walk us through. And then when he's done, we'll get Jeff on and we'll have some conversations. Hopefully this will spur some questions from you. I'll remind you that the comments options, chat features in either Facebook or YouTube, you can actually ask questions or make comments. They don't have to be questions. If you think of things while you're watching the video and you want to comment on it, feel free to do that. Or if you have a question you want to make sure we ask Jeff when we get back together after the video, please put that in the comments as well. And with that, I'm going to ask Julian and Doug to please run the video, please.
I want to ask you a question. Where is this? You know, if I were to take you up tomorrow morning and then just suddenly drop you along a road outside of almost any American city, you wouldn't have the slightest idea where you were, because it all looks exactly the same. I mean, where is that? Is that Albany? Is that Allentown? Is that Providence? Is that Pittsburgh? Is that Tampa or Topeka? Who can tell? The great American author Wallace Stegner once wrote, "If you don't know where you are, you don't know who you are." And by that, I think he meant that all of us have a fundamental need for a sense of orientation, for a sense of roots, for a sense of place. Well, I started thinking about sense of place quite a long time ago. It really started during the Vietnam War when I was a young lieutenant in the U.S. Army. I had been to field artillery school and jungle warfare training and had orders to a small fire base in the central highlands of Vietnam. And a couple weeks before I'm supposed to go, I get this call from the Pentagon. I have a colonel on the other end of the line. He's with the personnel division. He says to me, "Lieutenant McMahon, do you have any interest in being reassigned to Germany?" And I'm like, okay. Let me think about that. Germany or Vietnam? Yes, Germany. Sounds very exciting. I would love to go to Germany. And I was extraordinarily lucky. I was sent here, Heidelberg, West Germany. This is the headquarters for the U.S. military in Europe, and it was my home for several years. I was assigned as an aide to a U.S. general, and I spent the next couple of years of my life flying all over Europe in a helicopter. And that experience completely and totally changed my life. But I didn't realize how much it would change my life until I flew home to Birmingham, where I grew up. And I got out of the airplane and drove home, and for the first time ever, I saw the American landscape with a completely different set of eyes. Because, ladies and gentlemen, to travel is to learn. And a couple of things that I learned were, first, the world doesn't have to be ugly. And second, I learned that place is more than a spot on the map. Place is what makes your hometown different from my hometown. But more importantly, I believe sense of place is explicitly that which makes our physical surroundings worth caring about. That which makes our physical surroundings worth caring about. I can tell you that in many parts of the world today, we are suffering the social, economic, and environmental consequences of creating places that simply aren't worth caring about. And for all the improvements in cleaner air and cleaner water, better roads, better schools, faster computers, people still say, is this all there is? Can't our communities be more distinctive, more livable, more beautiful? Can't we have more connection with nature and the outdoors? You know, about 40 years ago, a guy named Stuart Udall, who was our former Secretary of Interior, wrote a book called The Quiet Crisis in the Next Generation, and he wrote something in this book that in many ways is as true today as ever. He said, America today stands on a pinnacle of wealth and power, and yet we live in a land of vanishing beauty, of increasing ugliness, of shrinking open space, of an overall environment diminished daily by noise, congestion, and blight. Now, please don't misunderstand me. I recognize that the U.S. is indeed one of the world's leaders in environmental protection. And of course, over the last 40 years, we've passed all kinds of laws to clean up air pollution, water pollution, toxic waste, protect sand dunes and wetlands. We've added millions of acres to our state and national parks, and we've added thousands of buildings and monuments to our National Register of Historic Places. But while we've been saving some landmarks like that, we've simultaneously been losing the landscape that gives those landmarks their larger sense of meaning. And while we've been cleaning up our air and water pollution, yes, our air is cleaner, and yes, our water is cleaner. But while we've been cleaning up air and water pollution, we've been losing our sense of place. Our sense of place. You know, the world is changing very rapidly. You know, the economy is changing, demographics, technology, consumer attitudes, market trends, immigration. We have 25,000 incorporated communities in the United States that are all in competition for jobs, people, and investment. They're trying to figure out how they can grow without destroying the things that people love about the place that they live. Well, the old economy was about making things. The new economy is mostly about designing things. The old economy was product-driven. The new economy is knowledge-driven. The old economy was cost-sensitive. The new economy is value-sensitive. In the old economy, markets mattered. In the new economy, place matters most. Why does place matter in the world we live in today? Because in a world where capital is footloose, if you can't differentiate Jacksonville, Florida from any other place, you will have no competitive advantage. The same is true of a project or a community or a building. One of the key but most often forgotten elements of successful economic development is community distinctiveness. Let's talk about a few examples. Let's talk about a community's front door, its gateway. And just like with meeting a person, a good first impression is important, and a bad first impression is hard to change. Do you think you'd rather visit a small town like this or a small town like this? Which one looks more like a community with a sense of pride and a sense of place? Which one looks more like a community that you would rather invest time or money in? If you don't remember anything else I say this afternoon, remember this. The image of a community is fundamentally important to its economic well-being. What do I mean by that? What I mean is that every single day in America, people make decisions about where to live, where to invest, where to vacation, where to retire, based on what our communities look like. What they look like. Let me give you a couple of examples. Let's talk about tourism. Tourism is kind of important because it is the biggest industry in the world. It is the first, second, or third largest industry in every single American state. So this is the official travel guide for the state of Oregon. Notice their slogan, Oregon, things look different here. Can you imagine a state travel brochure that said something like, Florida, things look the same here? Well, of course not, because what is tourism? Tourism is about visiting places that are different, unusual, and unique. The more any community in Florida comes to look just like every place else, the less reason there is to go there. On the other hand, the more a community does to enhance its distinctiveness, whether that's natural, architectural, cultural, artistic, what have you, the more people want to go there because that's exactly what tourism is. If every place was just like every place else, there'd be no reason to go any place. Now, I know some people will say to you, well, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. You really think so? Let me ask you this. Do you think this scenic view has more value, or does this scenic view have more value? Let me tell you what the leading real estate appraisers say about this. They say, quote, you can put a dollar value on a view. Scenic landscapes are an economic asset, not just because you and I think they're nice, but because other people are willing to pay to see the view and to experience the unique character of a place. They go on to say, quote, housing, hotels, offices with scenic views always command premium prices. The better the view, the higher the price. I mean, think about this. You go to the beach in the summer. You rent a hotel room with a view of the ocean. You're going to pay more for that room than the exact same room on the other side of the hotel. What are you paying for? I want to suggest to you, ladies and gentlemen, that the scenic landscapes of Florida have quantifiable economic value, which is just one of the reasons why some of these landscapes are worth preserving. You know, even the home builders figured this out a long time ago. They were doing a study back in 1994 trying to figure out what things would add value to a house more than anything else. Was it like the kitchen, the appliances, the garage, granite countertops? What was it? What they found was the most important factor affecting the market value of a home was the surrounding environment. They said a mountain vista or proximity to a park, water, or green space had a greater impact on the value of the home than the size of the house, the number of rooms, the type of appliances, or even the presence of a swimming pool. The surrounding environment was the single most important factor affecting the market value of a home. Another thing that affects value and sense of place is the presence or absence of historic buildings and neighborhoods. Some of you have probably read some of Thomas Wolfe's famous novels, like Look Homeward, Angel. He's the man who wrote the immortal line, you can't go home again. Well, sadly, Tom Wolfe can't go home again because there's his house in this parking lot in Asheville, North Carolina. Why is it important to preserve the historic buildings of Jacksonville? Because the historic buildings of Jacksonville are about the heart and soul of Jacksonville. It's about physically connecting people to the past. It's about telling you who you are and where you came from. As Daniel Webster once wrote, he said, quote, the man who feels no sentiment or veneration for the memory of his forefathers is himself unworthy of kindred regard and remembrance. So saving the historic buildings of Florida is about saving the heart and soul of Florida. But it's also incredibly good for your economics as well. This is, of course, the French Quarter. Spent a lot of time in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. I was among the group of planners and architects and engineers who were brought down to the city after Hurricane Katrina and asked to put together a redevelopment plan for the city. And they didn't want just a physical development plan. They wanted an economic redevelopment plan. So we all said, well, what are your biggest industries? Is it the oil industry, the chemical industry, the sugar industry, the seafood industry? They said, no. The biggest industry in the state of Louisiana is the tourism industry. And what's the engine of that industry? Well, it's called the French Quarter. But did you know that for almost 40 years, the state of Louisiana wanted to put a freeway through the French Quarter. That's more important and more valuable than any plant, factory, or distribution center in the entire state of Louisiana. And let me ask you this. How many people have been to the San Antonio River Walk? That's the most visited place in the state of Texas. That's the basis of that city's multi-billion-dollar year annual tourism industry. And it's the single defining characteristic of San Antonio. But what most people don't know is that at one point in the past, the city thought so little of that small river, they actually wanted to put it underground into a culvert. Today, it's the most visited place in Texas. Let's fly out to Seattle and let's go to the Pike Place Farmers Market. That's the #1 destination in the state of Washington. It gets visited by millions of people a year. And yet, about 35 years ago, there were some people on the Seattle City Council who seriously proposed tearing it down. Why? Well, they said, well, we need more downtown parking. Like parking for what? You can have all the parking in the world. If there's nothing to do, no one's ever going to want to go there. Now they love and revere this place and recognize it for the economic engine that it is. What's the #1 destination in Florida? It's Disney World, but what's #2? There it is. It's the Art Deco Historic District in South Miami Beach, one of the greatest urban places in North America. That was all going to be torn down. There were people saying, well, we got to have more high-rise condos in South Florida. You don't think we have enough high-rise condos in South Florida? I'm telling you, literally, people come from all over the world to go to this place today. Ladies and gentlemen, saving the historic buildings of Florida is about saving the heart and soul of Florida, but it's also about the economy of Florida. But I want to end by asking you to think briefly about the social and psychological value of what I've talked about. I want to tell you a little story. After I got out of the Army, I went to visit a friend who I'd met in the Army, a guy named Jeff Miller. He lives in a little town called Bayfield, Wisconsin. That's the northernmost town in the state of Wisconsin. We went to visit him, and while we were there, we went out to this little island off the coast called Madeline Island. There we saw this rock out in the field, and I'm like, what is that? And I walk over to this rock, and it says, this site was proposed for development in 1983 through joint efforts. This development was prevented. And I was like looking at this like, what in the world is this all about? And then we walked around to the back of the rock, and it said this marker is dedicated to the ancestors of the Ojibwe Nation who lie beneath this ground. Why is it, do you think, that people feel a sense of loss, like losing a loved one or a friend, when a grove of trees is cut down, an historic building demolished, a scenic view obliterated? It's not because we can't plant new trees or build new buildings. It's because I believe our sense of identity and well-being is tied in a very profound way to special buildings and places and views. These places are invested with rich symbolic importance that contributes to our sense of identity and well-being in a way no less fundamental than religion or language or culture. In fact, in ancient Rome, there was a maxim that said cities should preserve the visible symbols of their identity to give citizens a sense of security in a changing world. What we're oftentimes really trying to preserve is memory. Memory. It's an attempt to keep a mental grip on those familiar and accustomed places that make us feel comfortable and secure. The justification for preserving the special places of Florida is not just about the economy of this state, it's about the psychology of this state as well. Ladies and gentlemen, you can grow without destroying the things that people love. The special places of this state, the special landscapes and townscapes and streetscapes are worth preserving, not just because they're fragile and beautiful and resource-rich, but because they are emblematic of Florida and America. Thank you so much for having me here today.
All right. Well, hopefully you guys found that thought-provoking. It does look like we're getting some comments about stream loss. So I'm assuming the guys that are working on that technically have seen those comments. and take a look and see if we can rectify whatever that problem is. But again, like I say, if you weren't, if you're not got some wheels turning listening to that, you probably didn't listen to him too terribly closely. But right now, I'm really pleased to announce and introduce Jeff Powell. Jeff's a lifelong resident of the community. He's worked continuously to make it a better place to work, live, and play. He's dedicated to that. He's a board member of the Cambridge Waterfront Development, Inc., working to ensure that the plan for the waterfront is aligned with the best interests of our community. Jeff, I know you are a very, very full schedule and a very busy individual, so we truly thank you for making time for us tonight. Again, I want to appreciate you coming in.
Hey, Bill, thank you and all your sponsors and what you guys are doing here. It's a real service to the community. It really is. We always welcome the opportunity to get out here and let people know what's going on. That I'm a firm believer in that if the people aren't behind you, you got to correct and move it forward. So thank you. We appreciate it.
Great. So that was a pretty interesting presentation by Mr. Mann in terms of what do you think are some of the most important takeaways that our folks should take away from that? I mean, from your perspective after listening to it, what's your key takeaways?
The first thing is, I think you dated us by making that Johnny Carson reference there. I'm old enough to remember that, so I got that one. Bill, I'll tell you, I mean, we say it a lot at CWDIs. We're never going to out St. Michael's. We're not going to out Easton, and we're not going to out Ocean City. But we can be the best that Cambridge and Dorchester County is, and telling that local story. And preserving, the history and, why you step back and you look why people come here now, it's Blackwater, it's the open space. You look at the waterfront, the highest use things out there right now are the boat ramp, the playground, and the fishing pier. So why take that away? Why not make those better? Why not enhance them? And that whole open space and get it more usable for people. That's what I take from him. And I'll tell you, the other thing, that opening of his where, where are you? You could be anywhere in the country. I think any of that big national development that can fit out on Route 50, they can have it. But when we get down here on this waterfront piece, I think it's got to be done slowly and correctly. That's not what we're attracting. I think people can go anywhere and get that, but I don't think that's why they come here, and I don't think that's where we're headed. You bring in a big player and developer, they got to pay for what they build, and the way they do that is with those big national tenants, and I don't think that's what anybody wants out here on this, remarkable special piece of property. I just don't think that's where everybody wants it to be. There are some, I'll tell you, as a real estate guy, there are people that do, and they want to build right to the edge of the water, and that's not going to happen.
Right. So Tony he talked a lot about, and this probably doesn't apply as much down to water, but we've heard the question, historic, maintaining historic buildings and all, which we've been doing downtown for quite a while now. Any thoughts on that and some of the work that's been done downtown and how that complements what you're going to be doing on the waterfront?
Yeah, I think, and we're going to talk about the survey a little bit later, but that is one of the things that a recurring theme in people's comments, was not cannibalizing downtown and stepping back from the progress that's been made downtown. Our school of thought really is we would just like, it to be an extension of downtown. If we can get people off 50 and around the property and down to the Maryland Avenue Bridge in this way, and vice versa, the people that come to downtown, if we can get them out that way, that's our thing. We deeply understand that. And that is not, what good have you done? If you're just moving people around and not making a bigger pie or more pies. That's what we need to do. It's the work that Main Street's doing, that the Chamber's doing, and these neighborhood groups. Again, let's accentuate the positive and the things we already have going. Let's not try to recreate it. I think there's some real benefits we can do with some shuttles and bike paths and making it easier for people to move around from downtown to the waterfront. And actually now, you got the packing house. Cannery Park there, that's all moving forward. So you really have a loop, Cedar Street, Washington Street, up the race, down Gay, and back out around it. There's a story to tell the whole way around all of that. And it all ties together, and we all need to work together to capitalize on that.
Great. And you just touched on it. You just recently did a survey. Can you share any, I know it's really, really early afterwards, so we're not expecting detail because you just closed it. But is there anything you guys have been able to glean from preliminary reviews of that data while you're doing the deep dive?
Yeah. A couple things there. First, I'll tell you, when it first came up, the prior city council wanted us to do public meetings in each ward to get that feedback. I wasn't sure about that, and then COVID really shut us down. So we had to go to this survey type response. I got to tell you, it's been tremendous. I read so far, all I have is the raw data. That's all they've given us so far. But I read, I think, over 300 pieces of that so far. We just got it last Friday. And the nice part about it was that you could tell people took time and they thought about what they were doing. Whereas in a public meeting, that one dominant, loudmouth like me can kind of run a meeting and not everybody else can get their words in. So it was tremendous. The response we've got, hopefully, I would say early March, we'll have that public in the full, takedown of it out there. Some things that jumped out at me reading it, Bill. We're not going to make everybody happy. It was a very diverse amount of responses and thoughts there, but all good, and provoking. So, it's our job, to figure out what pieces of that are financially feasible, which ones we do later. Some of this is you start and hopefully it picks up momentum and grows. There was a lot of people that said, don't screw it up. And I echo that. I say that a lot. You don't get a second chance. And once you build something, it's hard to take it back down. So a slow, methodical process here is the way forward. The other thing, the downtown thing we talked about, that came up a lot in people's comments. The other one, sea level rise, was discussed a lot, and in this county, that's a big deal. The design firm that CWDI is contracted with, BCT out of Baltimore, just did a lot of work around the Inner Harbor, and they just did the downtown Annapolis, some of the planning down there around where they have the boat show and things like that. They're real familiar. I can tell you that the Annapolis one, I think they told us they plan on 4 foot of rise there. And the Naval Academy actually told them, which you would hope and think those guys probably know, they're thinking it's more like 8 foot, and that's a 50-year window, I think. So we know where we have a low spot out there on the point that's most vulnerable, but we're well aware, and taking that into consideration and everything out there. I think you'll see a stair step kind of plan to help mitigate that.
So, and I'm assuming some of this came out in the surveys, and it's been a comment from Allison Kennedy, just said it online, is that there's a lot of history here, and she mentioned specifically oysters, but there's a lot of maritime history and boating and shipping, and because being the second deepest port, there's kind of a history on here. Many comments on that, or thoughts, or people that are saying how that actually should play out as you do the design? Yeah,
I think and we've tried to say it, and I'll repeat it. We're standing on the shoulders of giants, like they say. The RUDAT was done, the Waterfront 2020 was done, the original Sailwinds plan was done. Heck, I remember back when the Rouse Corporation came to town and did a plan of the whole town. So it's not like we haven't heard a lot of this before. Don't know it. It's taking the pieces of it that'll work in this, that can be financed, that work or that we can do. Mm-hmm. I think, like I said earlier about out St. Michael's and St. Michael's are out, we've got a different story here. And Cambridge is a working waterfront. It's one of the last working waterfronts around. And I don't think there's any reason to do anything to damage that. But everything we can do to tell that story, to highlight it, to get people hands-on on a set of oyster tongs, or, in a dovetail, what's a different boat, lot of the pieces are here, Bill, and and then you throw the Harriet Tubman and the agricultural side and the Phillips Packing thing. I've said it before, and every now and then in your life, the stars kind of line up and you feel like you're in the right place at the right time with the right people around you to make stuff happen. And I feel that right now. There is so much good, positive energy out here right now. And I think people are looking for civil discourse to talk about stuff and be a part of their community and feel like they're making a difference. I'm a big believer that government closest to the people works the best. And I think we have a real opportunity here, and this survey, like I say, is a big first step to show that, and live that for real. I do know we're working on everybody that responded, that provided an email address. We're going to try to get a newsletter set up and start going out to people at least monthly. So, to keep people updated. That's a two-sided thing. You've heard me say it before. And I think one of the biggest things that historically we've done here is shoot ourselves in our own feet by listening to rumors, innuendo, simple jealousy sometimes gets in our way. So I think the more information that, we can get out there from the horse's mouth, the better we all are. And we all say it, the CWDI, and you couldn't ask for a better group of people, real diverse backgrounds, but it meshes real well. Rich Zeidman's the president, and he says a lot. It's funny how things come in there and we don't always agree, and they get chewed up and turned around and spit back out, but we usually do make the right decisions. And I think as a community, we need to do that too. You're not always going to maybe make the right point, but, everybody's got to be heard, and we have to take it into consideration.
Great. So you mentioned that sometime probably later in March. Have you thought about how you're going to share those survey results and get them out into the public, or is it any comments or ways or?
Yeah, I don't know yet. Other than, like I say, we'll try to get a newsletter together out. I think we'll get it to the press. You know what I mean? We'll get it into a format that makes some sense. And I will tell you that, we asked for the raw data.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't want to wait for just BCT to put it all together and give us, the pretty pie chart with the responses here and there. We wanted to see what people said,
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny reading through there. You'll catch that one-off comment that really will kind of hit you. And again, I can't thank people enough. There was a ton of people offered help. There were some PR people, some media people, the garden club. There was all kinds of people that are stepping up. We have to take advantage of that, and use that to keep people engaged and make them know this. We're just stewards. Frank's pretty adamant about saying that. We're just stewards of this thing and trying to do it right, and it keeping people informed about it, and hearing what people say. And believe me, we've heard that. It's part of the process, and it works. Again, I would say, we'll do some write-ups and get, the press has been real good to us. Bill, you guys have, the guys here at the radio station, maybe we come back and we do this again, where we can, have some results and take some questions and get it out, but it'll get out. People will know. And, again, I just want to thank people again for taking the time, because you can tell reading it that some people really thought about it. But it's all good stuff. It really is.
Great. And again, just good time for me to remind folks that are watching, if you have a question, shoot it into the chat box, and we'll get that over to Jeff to get him to answer it. So Jeff, you were here last about 6 months ago. How are things going with the transfer of the hospital? I know that was one of the things you guys were working on, and they're making really good progress out on 50 with the new facility. Are you guys making the progress you need to make there to have that ready to go when they get moved out?
I'm a little frustrated on that one, Bill, to be honest with you, but it is what it is. Shore Health is now part of a much larger entity, and I think some of those decisions are being made higher up. Ken Kozel's been fantastic. I talk to Ken on a regular basis, and he's in touch with us. They are doing, last I heard in my conversation with Ken, they're thinking September, and then hopefully out, October. They're doing some survey work right now on the hospital, so we know what we're looking at there demolition wise. Um, CWDI is working on that side of it, getting the building down, cleaned up, and that's more than an ocean. People like to think that's easy, but that building, the original hospital sat in the center, and then they built to the side of it, and then they built around it, and then they tore that original out. So there's a lot of years of stuff on that site, that have been built around, and I'm not going to say covered up, but you're not going to know till you get into it what you got.
Right.
So I think it's all positive. Again, Ken has been more than forthcoming with us and talked to us the whole way through. We had a meeting earlier this week with Secretary Holt, who I can't. I'll tell you, folks, if you see Secretary Holt, or if you're one of those folks that likes to write letters or let people know, that man is being incredibly gracious to Cambridge and Dorchester County, and I haven't seen it here since Hyatt. That kind of response from the state, and from Packing House to the Hearn Building to Maces Lane and Pine Street and the waterfront. I mean, it just if you get a chance, write a letter or a thank you. He deserves it. He really does. He's been real helpful with us as far as that demolition and some state resources that he's going to help us with there, I think, on that. So it's moving forward.
Yeah, and while Secretary Holt has done a lot for the entire area, he's really invested in down here. He's been down here quite a bit himself. He brought his entire staff down last year in February, just so they could see why it's such a special place and why he's so interested in it and wanting to be invested. So again, if everybody sees him, they should definitely thank him for the work, because it's showing throughout the community. Real quick, Brian Roach just commented while you were talking about the hospital. He wants to make sure the old trees that are out front are staying.
Yeah. Thanks, Brian. That's a line that won't be crossed as long as Frank Knorr and I are around, and I think everybody else. Every plan we've done, we've tried to take that whole green space where those big trees are and dedicate that as park space from day one. He was talking in the video about a view and the value. I can tell you, in the real estate world, you can't put a number on a tree, especially trees like that. You just can't. I mean, there are studies that show trees in neighborhoods, there's less depression and suicide and anxiety. Brian, I hear you, friend. And not while I'm there, not while Frank's there. And I don't think anybody on that current CWDI board would let that happen. We're making a real committed effort to open space and green space. And that one, again, I think is a no man's land. It's not going to happen.
Great.
While I'm talking about that, Bill, just because Brian commented, I know he's a fan of a movement and a book called Smart Towns. If you're not familiar with that, I would really recommend reading it. I just finished it because I knew Brian was agreed with a lot of what they say, and I do too. It starts a lot about taking the low hanging fruit. Not building a lot of new infrastructure, fix what you got. And I think, on the waterfront, we're thinking that same way, slow but steady, and don't outpace it. We get a lot of feedback and talk sometimes about a master developer coming in and taking the whole site. And I'll tell you, and some people know I was pretty involved when Hyatt came here, and if I had to do that deal today, I would do it different. And you look at some other projects in town, you look at the Beezer project on Trenton Street, some of the other subdivisions, you do a master plan, you're locked into it. Mm-hmm. If I had to do Hyatt today, I don't think we would have done the platted, single family residential lots as heavy as we did around that golf course, because the market shifted. So if you come in and do a master plan without leaving yourself some flexibility, the market can shift on you, the things can change. We're doing it right now with COVID. It's a whole different ballgame out here all of a sudden, because of COVID and this whole work from home trend, and does it stay or does it not stay? Mm-hmm. So, again, back to that smart cities thing, kind of do it one piece at a time, but with an overall idea of where you're headed and what you want and what kind of density and building heights and things like that. But I'm not sold on the master plan. There are guys that can do it, and I'm not saying we don't want to talk to them. We don't want them in town, but I think we're going to have a big say, in how it's done, and that some flexibility remains in there so we don't get locked into something. I mean, I'll tell you personally, closing Trent Street was one of the biggest mistakes that was ever made in this town. Everybody knows that there were some mistakes there made with the public access and the gates that went up and things like that. It's there, but it's hard to go back and fix that stuff if you don't catch it on the first side and do it right, and I think we're trying to learn from those past issues. And again, I see those comments too in the survey. Some people reference that kind of stuff and make sure there's public access. If it goes the way I think it will, and we're trying to do from CWDI, we're going to try to get a lot of the public access space done first. Continue that walkway from the wharf to the boat ramp, improve the walkway that's there, lighting, benches, trash cans, that kind of stuff. And then that's just like those trees on that backside of the hospital. That front 20% that we're saying is going to be open space. We want to define that, so that when a developer or, somebody comes to town, we can say, look here, this is it. You're not going past this. And again, I think I can almost say 100%, everybody on our board thinks that way. You're not going to build on the edge of the waterfront out front there, over on the Governor's Hall side and things, maybe, you can maybe do some more intense development there, but the open space and, the rural nature of what we are, you even look at downtown here, there's a lot of space, it's a wide street. There's space between buildings. It's not, every building's not 4 stories tall. You got that up and down kind of thing. And if you read some of that smart city stuff and you really think about it, for thousands of years in civilization, that's the way cities were designed. They were walkable, and there was small boxes that started that could be expanded and grown out. So it's, I don't know, I threw a lot at you right there, but I don't want anybody to think that we don't take serious what's going on here and the impact it has, and that it's, again, once you do it, it's real hard to undo it. So it's got to be done right, so there's no rush to go here and do anything haphazard and not learn from mistakes that have been made in the past.
Great. So a couple things. We are monitoring both YouTube and Facebook comments. So if you make them on either, we're watching them. And a couple came in while we were there. I'll address some of the real quick ones. Secretary Holt, if you want to contact him on the Dorchester Chamber website, dorchesterchamber.org, we actually have a listing of all the state officials and their contact information. So his email's out there, his phone number's out there. So you can go grab his information from there and send that out to reach him. So that's a quick and easy one.
Even not to interrupt you, Bill, but even I tell you, letting Governor Hogan know, it is a big help. Addie Eckert Senator Eckert is watching us. I think she's texted me here a couple of times. I'm glad she's hearing that, so she can pass it along too. I mean, I can't reiterate enough to people that when you have the city and the state and the county working together like this, you can move mountains. That either one of those three by themselves, it's really difficult to do. But when you've got all three kind of working in that same direction, we can get a lot done.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So the other comment came, Kevin, you actually touched on this a bit during your intro, but I'm sure he would like you to expand on it. He's still asking about the tension between downtown and the waterfront development, and you touched on that a little bit, but can you expand on it a little bit more for him to just, because we know that's an issue we talk about all the time, and I know you and Frank talked about it last time. You talked about it a few minutes ago as well.
Hey, look, my family and I own a building downtown, so I'm all for, rising tide lifting all boats, and again, the date, just what he talked about, the memory part and the history part. My grandfather used to own the Hearn building. It was Art Wells furniture store. I remember going to that movie theater there, sitting on the balcony as a kid. shopping, on Ray Street when I was a kid. And, again, that, and that's where, we push back a little bit on some larger player developers and things, because, sometimes you need a guy from the inside the game to tell you who not to play with or what to get yourselves into. And I'm just telling you, to bring a big national player in here to build what they want to build and to get the rents that they want to do it, we're going to cannibalize, other stuff. And I don't think that's what anybody wants. I see, and we talk about a lot, the connection between downtown and the waterfront. And like I say, now over to Factory F, in Cannery Park, up Cedar or up Washington, across the Pine, with the development that's being talked about there with Secretary Holt's office. I mean, there's and if you take a step back, Bill, if you've been anywhere, if you've been to Baltimore, if you've been to DC, it's really not that big of an area. There's blocks and blocks and blocks there. We're really not talking about that huge of an area. I walk it a lot myself. It's about a 3 mile round, if you do the whole trip, and that's opportunity, and to try to build up one at the cost or loss of another, just that's not where we want to go or what we want to do. You take a look at some of the debate that's going on in downtown Easton right now. Some big money's come in there and changed some things. It's pushing a lot of the locals out. We need to watch that and learn from that and be careful about that. I mean, I don't think anybody here wants to take away, from that. Again, a rising tide lifts all boats, and it's even that. The visitor center was always supposed to be a touch point where we get people there, and then we send them out to other parts of the county, down to Blackwater, to Harriet Tubman, to Vienna, to East New Market, or wherever. We early, and I can't remember the date, start to run together. We've had some talks with the National Park Service. They got some funding back in place for this Chesapeake Gateways network that they do, and real positive. Johnny Shockley, myself, Amanda Fenstermaker were involved with that, and there's going to be some real results come from that. And it just like he talked about in this video. The superintendent of that came to town and just drove through, and she was just intrigued, by the buildings and the architecture and what has been done to preserve things here. So, we get it. You know what I mean? We get it. And again, you got ideas, you got thoughts. I know downtown has had some changes there, personnel wise, and are doing some other things. But we're always willing to talk and meet and figure this thing out. And I think that's the best we can all do. Principles before personalities. Don't let that stuff get in the way. Let's just remember what we're trying to do, and that hopefully what's good for one is good for all, and not at the detriment of the other.
I'm going to take you back just a little bit, because as we were talking about the trees, a comment came in, and I know this has been talked about quite a bit, but we have a question from Linda about trying to save any portion of the hospital facade for this development. I know that's been discussed. So can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, we've had a couple of people look at it for it. I don't think so. Maybe the nurses' quarters, that 4-story, that's an office building now. There is one part of the hospital kind of on the ER side that if you look at, that's one of the older parts of it, and I'm not going to say no. I mean, I'm a believer in that too. If you can repurpose, so it might be we take some of it down and leave a piece. We just haven't got to that point yet, but it is definitely something we would look at and talk about. We had 2 fairly large developers, from a residential kind of side, look at it and see if it could be repurposed, but it's so cut up and so added onto and things like that. I guess until we really get in there. And it's hard, while it's occupied and you have patients in there, it's really hard to get in there and take a deep look at what you have. No, I appreciate that. I don't think that's off the table, but it may be very difficult, but I think there's even been talk, there's a chapel there, that we've put out to the hospital group that if there's things that don't move from there out to the new site, maybe we can do something with them. We got some ideas about a wedding meditation chapel type thing out there that have been tossed around, that we could do that. I know some people have said, can we reuse some of the bricks, and walkways and things like that? That depends on how it comes apart, but I get that too. A lot of people came into this county, through that hospital, and a lot of people lost people at that facility. So, like he talks about, in this video with the memories and stuff, we get that, and anything we can do to honor that, facility and what it was, I think we'll try to do.
Great. Linda had another question, and the answer is probably no for CWDI, but she wants to ask questions about repossessing some of the property that Beazer didn't develop. I'm assuming that would need to go back to the city council and
that's
work on outside. CWDI is really focused.
That's outside of our scope, only thing I would tell you is if we have people that don't work, on our site, maybe we can send them to some of these other locations and things, but that one's out of our scope. But I think the biggest thing there is, lesson learned, and, maybe, you get the market changes enough that they can get in there and redo some things there, that if they come and need something, you cut a deal to, we'll give you this or that, but you got to fix this and this kind of thing. So, right. But it's out of our scope right now, unless we're asked to help.
Okay, cool. We talked a little bit about the hospital transferring the property. Where do you stand with the city and the county completing their process of the transfer of the property to you guys? Is that moving along at the right pace?
Not as fast as I would like, but probably as fast as it should. You got to give, this new city council and the mayor a chance to settle in. And, part of all that delay was this survey. So we're getting close on that. Like I say, hopefully here, end of the month, early March, we'll be on track with that, and we'll move forward with that. And I got to say, I got to give credit to the mayor, has stepped up. He's already been involved and made contact with us about some people that have contacted him and things. And it's the city council, I've served, at the county level, and it's tough, that you don't know who to trust, who not to trust, when you're early on. I think our message to them is and what we have to do is show that they can trust us, to move that forward. I think we'll get it done. It just, Secretary Holt's been pretty clear about it, that any of the state involvement is going to come through CWDI. So, we're looking at pretty hefty amount of demolition and liability once that comes down, that somebody's got to be willing to take. And that's what we were set up to do. So, I think we're close. I would say hopefully by summer we have that worked out. And if it's in phases, it's in phases, whatever it takes. We just got to keep moving forward and making sure everybody's comfortable with the process.
Great. We do have a question from Judy Diaz, and you touched on this a little bit, but I think she was looking for, were there, you read 300 some odd comments. Were there any commonalities in those that you think you could share?
I think what I touched on, downtown, the water rise, don't screw it up. I didn't, and I apologize. I just didn't have a chance yet to get into a lot of the specific questions. I read a lot of the final comment stuff. But we'll get that. We'll get that out to everybody, and we'll see. But I apologize. I don't have enough of that data yet to give you a real solid answer.
Yeah. I figured that was kind of the case. And we did have a question about this being recorded. This is being recorded. It'll be posted on the WHCP Facebook page for folks to go out and watch, and we'll do some boosting of it to get other people to watch this and see it. So we talked about this last time, and how's COVID really impacted you guys? Do you think it's slowed you down a lot, or minor inconvenience for where you're at in terms of a timing standpoint if we come out of this later in the summer? Or
yeah, Bill, I think it slowed us down, but honestly, it's probably been an opportunity. We were probably moving too quick anyhow. You set an organization like this up, and you want to have some wins, and you want to get out there and do some things. And it probably was good. It helped us get some housekeeping stuff straight and get the organization set up. I think the biggest thing COVID has shown is, again, the whole work from home thing. If if you're paying attention to the local real estate market, I mean, it's a different ballgame out here today, you know, and a lot of people are coming here to make it home. And just like they talked in this video, the reason is the open space and the public access and things. So we have to keep that in mind. It's opportunity, you know, as bad as that sounds, you know, with the devastation that it's creating, it is creating some opportunity for the county and the city as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Great. So you guys talked quite a bit about several different projects that were potentials back in July. Anything radically changed there? Anything new that you are able to share at this point that has come up in that 6-month period about things that you're looking at or considering for the property?
Yeah, I would say one of the big ones, and this was in the survey, mixed response, but the letter of intent we have with the senior living facility is expired. Probably will not go forward anymore. So that's a pretty big change. Mm-hmm. I know a lot of people were concerned about that, but that's off the table. And I think that's probably the biggest one. The other two local guys we were dealing with were still moving forward. They're still interested in wanting to go forward. I will tell you, like you and I were talking earlier, Bill, in the last 3 weeks, the floodgates opened a little bit. We've had some people step up that really want to come take a look at the site and have some ideas, and hopefully late February, early March, we'll be doing that. I'm meeting with a group Friday that's a hospitality marina type group that has some local ties. So hopefully that'll go well. A lot of positives.
Yeah, I think people are becoming much more optimistic now, and you're seeing some of that in other parts of the market. So last question for you tonight, give you final word on this is, what do you need from the community still to help you make this successful? I mean, what's the real community input that you need and support to make this work?
Yeah. Again, you know, I thank people for taking the time to do that survey, and I think now you kind of got to hold us to that task. You know, I tell people all the time, I'll talk to anybody, you know, if you want to meet and have lunch or go over some ideas, you know, maybe you'll change my mind, you know, maybe I'll change yours, or maybe we'll come to a better compromise in the middle about what'll work or what won't. So I think just staying engaged, staying involved, you know, if you got a question, call somebody that knows, you know what I mean? Don't just take the rumor mill and whatever and run with it. The other thing, just real quick, you know, you go back to this video, clean up your yard, you know, plant some flowers, spread some mulch, get rid of the, you know, the trash that's around. If there's an old, you know, something, just clean up a little bit, folks. I mean, just like he said in this video, it's amazing how much of an impact that has on a neighborhood or a street or a block, you know, just, you know, and I go back to Brian, you know, and that smart towns thing, you know, the low hanging fruit, there's a lot of low hanging fruit here that we don't have the ability or time to deal with that other groups and other people can. So I think just taking pride in who we are and what we are. And we drive somebody through, you know, they see stuff, you know, I mean, developers and real estate guys have a different sense of what they're looking for and what they're looking at sometimes. And it's low hanging fruit, you know, just take care of, you know, what do they say, you know, it would be a much better country if we all concentrated more about our own dinner table, you know. So I would say the same thing here, you know, not to say don't, you know, stay with us and let us know what you think here on the waterfront, but let's keep everything else up to date and cleaned up and looking sharp.
That's great advice. And actually, again, that's something that everybody can do, and you know, around your house, and then to actually get engaged in community cleanups. We do those quite a bit in terms of actually, and besides keeping the river clean and the streams clean, it actually makes it look a whole lot better, and something that each and every one of us can do on a regular basis. So, Jeff, I really, again, want to thank you for taking the time. I know your schedule is extremely busy. Also want to thank you for your time you spend doing this work. We know it's a labor of love for you, and it's important what you do, and we truly appreciate all your efforts in working on this. And I know you're very sincere when you tell folks you'd love to get their input. So, folks, if you have questions or suggestions, I'm sure reaching out to Jeff will do that for you. Also, again, want to take one last chance to thank our sponsors for tonight: WHCP, Cambridge Association of Neighborhoods, Dorchester Banner, Dorchester Star, and the Dorchester Chamber of Commerce. Keep an eye out on Facebook and various ways we communicate for the next Cambridge Cambridge. I can't even say it tonight. So we'll end on coming back and joining us for the next conversation. Just keep an eye out for that. And everybody have a good night. Travel safe, and we'll see you soon.